Hey guys, it's Natalie and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about all the books I DNF'd or did not finish in 2019. And I read about 64 books in 2019 and I only DNF'd about 8 of them, and then I didn't like about 5 of them. So out of the 64 I read, only about 13 were kind of not good for me. So I think I had a pretty good reading year. So let's just get straight into the video and I'll tell you about the 8 books that I DNF'd in 2019. Also, I wanted to apologize in advance if you hear my chair squeaking. It's a very squeaky chair, so if you hear it creaking, I'm sorry. So let's just get straight into the video. So the first book that I DNF'd in 2019 is The Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, and I've heard so many good things about this book, and I heard really great things about this author. He's a very well-known adult thriller author, and I was really excited to pick this one up from the thrift store earlier this year, and I was just really disappointed by it. So I didn't like this for a variety of reasons. First of all, I thought it was very slow-paced and very confusing. I didn't really understand like what was going on, and there was a bunch of French landmarks just like name dropped throughout the beginning of the book, and I'm not familiar with French landmarks, so it was just very confusing to me. And I also didn't know this is the second book in a series called the Robert Langdon series, and I just didn't know this was the second book in a series. And I was just really disappointed by this because I heard it was very gripping and it was very like mind-blowing, like very cool and different, and I was just really disappointed by it. So I DNF'd this one at about, I believe, either 25% in or like 40 or something like that. I just found it really confusing and slow, and I just didn't really enjoy it. The next book that I DNF'd in 2019 is The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger, and if you guys probably saw my Catcher in the Rye rant review, you would know all the reasons in detail why I did not like this book. But to sum it up, I basically did not like the main character Holden. I found him to be very egotistical and narcissistic and just rude to women, and I just did not like him as a character. The book didn't really have a plot, and I don't know, I just really did not vibe with this book. I didn't find it interesting. It didn't feel necessary. I just didn't really enjoy it, and I get why people would like it, because if you do like a actual like analysis on what it means, then I get why you would like it, because you see like that there's like more meaning behind it. But even though I know the meaning behind it, I still just don't like it. I don't like Holden as a character. I just don't like how there's no plot, and I just found it wholly uninteresting and boring. And unfortunately, it's one of the classics that I don't enjoy, so I DNF'd Catcher in the Rye at about 50%. So the next book I DNF'd in 2019 is Roald Dahl's Book of Ghost Stories, and this is an anthology collection of ghost stories that Roald Dahl compiled. He didn't actually write any of them himself, but it's just a compilation of ghost stories that he liked or enjoyed. So I just found this to be incredibly uninteresting. I actually picked this up off my bookshelf because it's been sitting there since forever. I've had this for a really long time, and this book was published in, I believe, the 80s, and I just had it forever. So I decided to try to give it a go for Spookathon since it was October. It was a spooky time, so I thought ghost stories would be perfect, and these were just so boring and so uninteresting, and they're written in a very old style that I just did not click with. Books that have like an old kind of dialect or like way of writing don't really bother me, because I like books like that. Like I really enjoyed Wuthering Heights this year, for example, but I just could not get into this writing style. I found them to be really uninteresting and boring, and they're kind of like the ghost stories that your grandpa tells you that aren't actually scary. And I just found that they all had kind of like the same like tagline or like life lesson learned from each story, which was someone you know could be a ghost. And so it just really was not interesting. And if you really like cheesy horror or like scary stories like Goosebumps or something like that, then maybe I would recommend this for you. But if you like to be really scared, then I would not recommend this, because I don't think it's gonna do it for you. So yeah, I DNF'd this one at about 40% in October, and I just could not continue with it. So yeah. So the next book I DNF'd in 2019 was probably one of my most disappointing reads of the year, and that is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. And I've heard so many great things about Margaret Rogerson's work, and she's very well loved in the fantasy community, and I wanted to try out her first book before I read A Sorcery of Thorns, because A Sorcery of Thorns was getting so much hype, and I really wanted to read her first book before I read Sorcery of Thorns, just to see, you know, if I clicked with her writing style, to see if I would like it, and everything like that. So my issue with this book started on page 1. I just hated the writing style of this. I found it to be way too descriptive, way too flowery. There's way too many like metaphors going on. It would be like, you know, her hair was red like fire, you know, his eyes were green like trees, and it was just very over descriptive, way too many metaphors, and just overall way too like flowery for my taste. And there's other authors who have flowery writing styles that I do enjoy, but this one I just could not do it, because it was every other sentence were these like inane descriptions of things, and it just drove me insane. So I first of all did not like the writing style, and basically, I didn't really tell you guys what this is about, but it's about a girl named Isabel who is kind of in the lower class of society, and in the higher class of society, it's like they're called fair folk, and they're very like highly esteemed. And the only thing about fair folk is that they can't make human crafts or like human things, like painting, you know, sculptures or anything like that. They can't cook things, so basically they trade with the humans for their crafts that they make. And Isabel is a painter, and so there's a guy named Rook who is very esteemed by the fair folk. I believe he's a prince or something like that, and he goes to be painted by Isabel, and then Isabel paints him and it goes horribly wrong, and so then Rook takes Isabel to be tried by the kingdom basically for like her crimes of painting him the wrong way. And it just was not, I don't know, I just found this to be kind of like all over the place, and it didn't seem very like structured. It kind of was just like an idea that was written. It felt more like a draft of a book than like an actual book. And I also did not care about the romance that was happening between Isabel and Rook. Like, normally I am totally for enemies to lovers, but this book I just could not do it. And there was also a power dynamic between Rook and Isabel, because Rook is higher up in like the world because he's a fair folk and she's like a human, and so it just had a power dynamic that I didn't like, and he was just overall like an a-hole. I hate it when characters like in the beginning of the book seem very like strong-minded, like very like powerful independent people, like Isabel for example, but then as soon as they meet the love interest, like their brain turns to mush and they forget everything that they've ever known their entire life, and they're just like, oh yes, I want to be in love with you. And I don't like when that happens. Like, I don't like how characters like that just lose all of their like morals and like everything like that just because of some boy. So overall, I just did not vibe with this book. I didn't really like the one-sided insta-love of the romance. I didn't like the power dynamic in the relationship. I didn't like how Isabel turned from like strong to like meek, and then I just did not like the writing style at all basically. So I DNF'd this one at 45%. I usually try to get to 50% when I'm trying to like DNF a book. Like when I feel like I'm gonna DNF it, I try to get 50% of the way through before I call it quits, because I like to give it a fair fighting chance. But with this one I just could not do it and I had to put it down. So unfortunately I didn't like An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson, but maybe I'll like Sorcery of Thorns. I'm still kind of considering if I should give that one a try. So if you've read A Sorcery of Thorns and it's way better than Enchantment of Ravens or something, let me know in the comments down below and I will consider reading it. The next book I DNF'd in 2019 is The Way I Used to Be by Amber Smith, and this one doesn't have a dust jacket. I think it got like really gross and I had to take it off or something. But I DNF'd this one because it has a couple of triggers that are like really just difficult for me, and that really sucks because I heard that this book is really good and it has a really high rating on Goodreads, and everyone who I follow on Goodreads or is friends with on Goodreads, they all rated this book really high, and I would really love to try to like push past it and like read it because I just heard so much good things about it. So hopefully I will be able to finish this one in 2019. But yeah, I didn't DNF this one because it's like bad or anything, just because I have a couple of triggers that I need to get past in order to read it. So hopefully I will get around to reading this in 2020 and I can successfully finish it. The next book I DNF'd in 2019 is Love at First Like by Hannah Orenstein. So basically I started listening to this book on audio because I had it in my recommended books on Scribd, and I was looking for something new to listen to at work, and I was really in the mood to listen to like a fun, lighthearted romance. So I started listening to Love at First Like, and I really liked the way it was narrated. Like, it was very like upbeat and very fun and light, but I just didn't like the story itself. I found the main character to be very egotistical. She really only looked out for herself, and I just didn't really vibe with the book. I found the plot to be kind of like dumber and dumber as it went on further, and I just couldn't bring myself to finish it. Like, the audiobook isn't objectively bad, but I just don't really like the story itself, basically. I don't know how far I DNF'd this. Oh, I DNF'd it at 32%. And I just didn't really like it. There wasn't any chemistry with the love interest, and I just didn't feel it. So I'm sorry to Love at First Like by Hannah Orenstein. And I also looked on Goodreads, and it's one of the lowest rated books I have on my like TBR list, and it's like a 3-star rating on Goodreads. So maybe I should have looked at that before I started listening to the audiobook. But you know what? It's fine. It just didn't work for me. I can see why other people would like it because, you know, it's very fun and upbeat, and it's like kind of like a unpredictable like predicament that the character is in. So it's kind of like fun in that aspect, but I just didn't really like the main character. There wasn't any chemistry with the romance, so it just wasn't for me. We're on to the second to last book that I DNF'd in 2019, and that is The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. This is a book that I was very excited to read because I heard everyone talking about it, and it just has a gorgeous cover. So I got this as my September book of the month, and I've had it steadily on my TBRs since September, and I just have not reached for it at all, and I don't know why. And I think that books just keep bumping it down my TBR, and so I just keep reaching for other things like newer releases that keep coming out. And I got about, I think, like 28 pages into this before I put it down, and I do want to pick this one up again because I really enjoy portal fantasy and I really enjoy historical fiction. So I feel like I would like this. I just really need to like kick it in a high gear and like get through it. So hopefully in 2020 I will have the chance to pick this up. I've had it on my TBRs forever, like I said, and I really just want to finish reading it, so hopefully I can finish it. I really enjoy the writing style and everything like that. I don't have any problem with that in that aspect, but things just keep knocking it down my TBR, so I just need to like set time aside and read it. So hopefully, you know, I can get to it. It's so beautiful and I just love looking at it. So the last book I DNF'd in 2019 is actually a book that I DNF'd only about a week ago. It's currently the last week of December, and I DNF'd this one a couple days or like a week ago or something like that. And it is One Day in December by Josie Silver. So I'm not even sure why I picked this book up to begin with, because I hate insta-love with a burning passion, and this book is exactly that. I just don't know why I thought I could give insta-love another chance, and I'm really disappointed in myself. One Day in December basically follows this girl named Lori who is on a bus one day in, I believe, like 2008, and she sees a guy outside the window. She instantly falls in love with him, feels a connection with him, and then her bus drives away and she never sees him again. But every day since that day she thinks of him every single day, and then she goes to a Christmas party, I think like 2 years later, and her roommate's boyfriend, who gets introduced to Lori, is the guy that she saw outside the window of the bus stop many years ago. And so I thought this book was very cool in the fact that it spanned over the course of a decade, and that kind of made me want to read it. It sounded really interesting for that reason. But I just cannot do insta-love, like no matter how hard I try. It just like never works for me. And I just really like a slow burn romance that like builds up over time. Like, I just don't believe in people who like look at someone who they know nothing about and they're like, you're the love of my life. I just don't like that at all. It's not my thing. So I don't really know why I thought I would like this book. So I got it as one of my December book of the month picks in my book of the month subscription box, which I will link down below if you are interested in trying it out. I really like the service. It's not, this video is not sponsored or anything, but I just really like the service, so I will link it down below in the description. So basically I just did not vibe with this at all because A, the insta-love, B, I found it to be very boring and not very like engaging or anything like that. And I also didn't really like the perspective of the love interest named Jack, and the way he like talked to himself was just really kind of disgusting, I'm gonna be honest. And he would constantly compare Lori, the main character, to her roommate Sarah, who he's dating, and he's like, oh, Sarah's like all curves and long hair, and then Lori's just like the girl next door. And so he's constantly like comparing the two, which I think is like really unfair. And like, you know that Lori and Jack are gonna get together at some point in the book, so it just feels like really gross that he's like thinking of her like that. And I think at one point he even mentions that he thinks of Lori as like a best friend's sister or something like that, or just something really gross and weird like that. So I just did not like this book at all, and I could not force myself to keep going. In 2020, I'm going to try to, you know, allow myself to DNF books easier and just not force myself to read a book if I'm really not feeling it, because like I said, I try to get to at least like 50% before I DNF a book, but I'm not even sure I want to do that anymore because I'm just like forcing myself to read something that I'm not feeling, and I'm wasting more time by doing that. So I think I'm just going to really try to allow myself to DNF a book if I'm not liking it in 2020. So maybe next year my list will be even longer for books that I DNF'd. Who knows? But anyways, I just did not vibe with this book at all. Didn't like the insta-love, didn't like the romance, didn't like love interest, yada yada yada. I found it really boring, so yeah. I can definitely see why people would like this book because, you know, it's a really fun holiday themed romance and it takes place over like 10 years, which is really interesting. It's not like what most books do. So I thought that part of it was really interesting, but I just did not like feel like the chemistry and everything like that. Don't like the insta-love. I already told you that. So yeah, I couldn't continue with this book, so I'm sorry. One Day in December by Josie Silver, and I will be giving away my book, unfortunately. So that concludes all of the books that I DNF'd in 2019. It was a total of 8 books, which, like I said, I think is a pretty low number considering I read about 64 books this year. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Leave a like, subscribe down below, and hit the notification bell if you don't want to miss a single upload. And let me know some books that you DNF'd in 2019 or books that you didn't really love in 2019, and we'll just chat about books. So yeah, thanks for watching and have a great day. Bye!